welcome to my studio here in Castlemaine. I just primarily do printmaking now, and this little workshop's primarily for lino cuts, and this is basically, I'll teach you how I got started doing printmaking myself. When I went through art school as a painter, and then I gave up painting. After art school I discovered lino cuts, and basically all I had was a piece of lino, a couple of some cheap tools and a spoon and a piece of paper and some ink. It's pretty simple, but there's a few little bits and pieces that I can teach you, or try to teach you. So possibly we can have a little look around my studio here. This is my big press Elvis. This is my pride and joy, the Colombian iron hand press, built probably in the 1850s. And this one was built in Edinburgh. A lot of bits and pieces. I'll show you if you come down here, I'll show you my biggest lino cut. This one here, Slow Boat, which was took 4 months of torture to cut that, nearly killed me. So that was kind of the last of that style. This is my more recent work, which is becoming a bit more stylized and okay, so first things first, you need a piece of lino. So this is silk cut lino. This is mainly all the lino you get nowadays. Well, there's that blue soft vinyl stuff, which I think is awful. So this is silk cut, and it's that grey colour. Most art shops sell it. So when you cut lino, you see a ruler and a blade, and it's best to cut it from the back. You don't need to cut all the way through. You just score it a couple of times, and then you just snap it off. And then what I like to do, most people often just will usually cut on this, but from doing wood engraving, where you paint the surface of the wood black so you can see where you're cutting, I decided that I was going to, that was a good idea to do it with lino as well, because I often do these really big lino cuts and I glue it onto a piece of board, and I have to stand it up to look at as I spend weeks and months cutting the thing. So it's if I paint the surface black, I can actually see what I'm cutting, and you can see the picture emerging, which I think makes it a lot easier. So basically I just use cheap acrylic black paint, and I wash it down a bit with some Art Spectrum drawing ink, just to loosen it up a bit and make it a bit runnier. And the beauty of it is, when you paint it black, it just becomes clearly obvious what it is you're doing. So when this is all black, you just imagine if you do nothing and you just roll ink up on the surface, that's what your print's going to look like. And so everything you cut will be white and everything you leave will be black. Just remember though, it'll be mirrored. So if you're writing text, it has to be back to front. But otherwise, the black's black and what you cut's going to be white. So just to open things up, I'll just use the hairdryer. Also, when you're cutting the lino, it's not so bad in hot weather. The colder it is, the harder it is to cut. So if you need to make it softer to cut, you just can use a hairdryer. Just softens the lino up and makes it easier to cut. You can also stick it in front of the heater or use a hot water bottle, but don't get it too hot or else then it just gets all fudgy. Okay, then just to show you what you can do if you want to transfer a drawing onto there. If you just I'm just going to do this pretty roughly. If you draw around your block and then you drew your picture. In this case, a self-portrait, and then probably the next view of that. Okay, it's more of a pencil neck. There you go. And you just then cut it out. Stick it on the block, get some carbon paper or transfer paper. You can get coloured ones and all sorts. And then you need a biro. And basically just draw over your drawing. Sort of see it, but you can. And then you basically just have to cut. Now, I've got these nice Swiss tools. I think this, FAL or something. PFIEL, I think, something like that. They're really nice tools. There's some Chinese ones I got in China and Japanese, but these tools, just the cheap ones from the art shop, they're pretty good. I reckon you can get a packet of them for about $10, and half the time I don't even bother if I used to use these, I wouldn't even bother sharpening them. They're really sharp, and once they completely become blunt, you just buy another packet. So then basically, so like I said before, that's going to all be black. Everything you cut's going to be white, so you're creating the lightness. What you're doing is creating the light, whereas what most people are normally used to is creating, doing with a black pen on white paper or charcoal or pencil, and you're creating the shadows. But the thing that it's always hard for people to get their head around when they're doing lino cuts and wood engraving and relief printmaking is that you've got the shadows and the darkness already. You're actually creating the light. So highlight on the nose. It's always good too to think in your picture where the light's coming from. So if this is an apple on a table, you have a strong light coming from a certain point. It's always good to, I find, from the side even, to create light and shadow. Needs to be heated up. Rudimentarily. Main thing to remember if you're doing, even if it's something like a realistic image, it's all about patterns and mark making and having variety of marks. So if you're doing a background or sky or whatever, it's just all something where you can make interesting patterns and so forth, just to add, makes a picture more vibrant and exciting if you have different patterns going on. So you have your V tools, they're sort of more for doing line work. And then there's round ones, and they're good for doing a little stippling. I always wanted to be an artist when I was a kid and at school, but we didn't do printmaking. We had good art teachers, but I was just going to do art at art school. That's all I wanted to do, so I just figured I'd do painting. I didn't even consider printmaking. And then the problem was with the painting was I wasn't really into paint, and I tried and tried for years, but I just wasn't. I basically liked the idea of telling stories and narrative things, and so then when I discovered Linocuts, it suited me much better with the graphicness of it and the ability, the more of a medium that was more suited to telling stories, a bit like posters or comic strips. And then I was doing Linocuts at home with just printing with a spoon, which I'll show you soon. And then I just started off doing it like this, and then I tried 2 colours, and I was doing reduction prints, and I was just doing them at home. I didn't have a studio, and then I just on the kitchen table, just for the ink, and then I did 2 colours and 3 colour reduction prints, and then until I was doing about 6 or 7 colour Linocuts, and then I did a little etching course at CAE, just a weekend thing, and I enjoyed etching as well. And then I went back to art school in '96 to do an honours year in printmaking at Monash, and there was a very vibrant printmaking studio at that point, and there was lots of practicing printmakers there, Ros Atkins and Dean Bowen, Jeff Ricardo, Peter Lancaster, to name just a few, and also Tim Jones introduced me to wood engraving, and that just that was the most incredible thing, learning wood engraving. That's probably my... I just love the narrative aspect of wood engraving, which you could involve storytelling and poetry, and make little books and things out of wood engravings, and then yeah. So I've got the anyway, get the idea. The thing you got to avoid doing, what most people will do when they do this, they'll just start cutting white outlines around everything. You got to try and, if you want to do some more drawing on, just use a pencil, but don't just do everything around with just white outlines. If that makes sense. quickly show you that sharpening is my constant. I'm never quite sure about sharpening. It's kind of tricky, but I have tried stones and water stones. It's very easy with sharpening these tools to, which I probably do half the time, of not beveling off the right shape or edge. So I've been lately just trying to use these leather strops and just doing it regularly, so they're never really super blunt. That's just the polishing compound thing, but you also get the hard ones that you can rub on, and then it's probably a little less damaging to the blade on the tool. So you just sort of get that angle and just run it down, and just try and keep them sharp and not let them get too blunt. Okay, I've finished my masterpiece. Thing is, probably best to take the black ink off first. I don't think it matters too much, but apron on. Okay. I'll just use a bit of metho. I don't have any occupational health and safety officers inspect my studio, so just do what I like. Even use terps. Alright. I don't normally, I'll just show you how to ink up first with a spoon. I'll just use this little nice cute little roller. So you need a little slab of glass, or just a little, even a tile, just something really smooth and hard like glass. And then when you roll and spin until it's all completely flat and velvet-like. If you've got it, the bigger the Linocut, the bigger areas are black, you'll probably need a little bit more ink than just. You don't want to push the ink into the fine lines. You just want the ink to just roll on the surface. So I'm not pushing very hard at all. You have to go a few times. Nothing worse than a Linocut that's over-inked and got too much pressure on the printing, and it all looks scorchy and messy. You want things to be crisp, and you just get used to practice. You can sort of see the little sparkle. Might be alright. Okay, so I'll just put that there, and then with the paper, when you're printing by hand with a spoon, it's best not to use paper that's the really thick 300 GSM printmaking paper. It's a bit, I mean, you can try, you can do it, but it's a bit difficult to. What's easier and nicer is a thinner paper, and even these nice Japanese papers. This is a origami paper, I think. I think it's like 70 GSM. And when you prepare paper in printmaking, you don't usually cut it with a knife or scissors. You tear it just to keep that sort of a deckled edge thing. So just and what I would normally do too, usually make up a registration sheet. I'd do it a bit better than this, but you get the idea. So I know where to put the, because you want to have your print nicely placed on the paper, not just sort of all crooked, and you want more room at the, well, always have more room at the bottom than the top. So you can make up a, sorry I didn't do this properly, but you can sort of draw it. And also work out obviously you would do this before you ink the block up. Anyway, you get the idea. So you start off at the top, pin it down with 2 fingers, and then you drop it on. And just hold it down so it doesn't move, or you don't want to smudge it, and then you can just hold it down firmly and just do little bits at a time. And the beauty of this Japanese paper, or rice paper, or whatever it's called, you can actually see the image coming through. You print lino cuts through a press, which I normally do. It's just even pressure over the whole thing. I suppose one of the advantages of this is that you certain areas of black you can give more pressure, and you can see it coming through. And also the other advantage of doing it this way, of course, is you don't have to spend thousands of dollars on a big heavy press. I used to do this all the time with big, before I didn't know any better, I'd use thick paper and I'd do these big lino cuts with all these colours and reduction prints, and I can't believe I did it really. Okay. This probably explains why I'm so buffed. You can probably cut that bit. Attempt at humour. No. Okay, we ready? Let's have a look. And also, a good thing about doing this way too, you can have a little sneak peek and see. Oh, yeah, might need a bit more ink than that. So anyway, it's the first proof for often the lightest. So I've got it a bit crooked, it's a bit speckly, but you know, it's a handmade thing. It's not out of a inkjet computer printer thing. So that's all part of the aesthetic. Okay, now here's another little piece of high-tech equipment that I use all the time. It's a Shish Kebab skewer, and this is a good example to show you if you've got some speckly bits, the spotty bits that haven't come out as black as you would like. Sometimes I use this little, you can just, while it's still wet, you can touch up with the little skewer. Also, sometimes I use a dead fine line pen, like one of these pens that's dead, so I don't use the ink. It's just a good one for moving the ink around if there's certain spots that you want to have flat black rather than. I mean, the first proof's often light anyway, and especially on a press, until you get the pressure right, and it's best to start a bit under, and then and anyway, the second roll up too, the ink builds up a bit more as well. So. Didn't realise I was so handsome. Looks like a photograph. No, you can cancel. You can grab that bit too. That was another attempt at humour. Okay. Now, I'll tell you about the ink, and also while I remember, sometimes when you cut the lino cut, or when you tear the bit, you cut the blocks of lino, often there's all these hairy bits around that sometimes catch the ink and come on the paper. The little trick too is with just a cigarette lighter or a match, you can just burn them off preferably not with a fan going. Anyway, now the ink that I use is oil-based ink. You just get an oil-based block printing ink, which you can get pretty well anywhere. Because you've got to wash up with vegetable oil or chirps if you're brave. Probably not good for your brain, but my brain's gone anyway, pretty much so. And I use this ink. I get this ink from Holland. It's a rubber-based ink, Vanson. It's a really good ink, but this latest tin that I just opened really smells really badly, which I'm a bit concerned about. It's really smells like I'm getting instant brain tumours. But you can get water-based inks. Apparently they're quite good nowadays, but I haven't really used them. But wow, sleeky. I can show you how to print one of my. I'm printing this big Linocut at the moment. I'll just show you what I do. I'm gonna wash my hands first. Okay, alright, now so when using an etching press, you can get these metal rods, metal strips, just from the hardware store or the timber yard, and they're actually the same, exactly the same thickness as the lino, which is, I don't know what it is, a couple of mil, something. And I'm using this Somerset paper, which is, you get a smooth paper, it's best like velvet or satin. You don't want the really coarse, rough paper. This is pretty nice paper. So I just sort of hook it up first. I've always in my registration things. And printing on it, everyone has different methods with printing lino cuts on etching presses. So these are built for etching, they're not built for doing lino cuts, they're built for having the felt blankets and then having the really tight pressure to push the ink into the plates of the copper or zinc etching plates. So obviously that's not what we want to do with a lino cut. We want it just to kiss the surface, and we don't want that sort of pressure. So we don't need, the way I was taught to do it, and I find this the best way, is I don't have any blankets or boards or anything. Some people will use boards and a blanket, but I just don't use anything. I just got these metal strips, and I lower the roller down until it just pretty well doesn't go any further on the runners, and then just give it a little tweak. You might need to adjust things a couple of times until you get it right. The thing is though, you have to have the paper up in the air, so you need 4 arms. And so I've got my 13-year-old boy Lucas, who's my filmmaker son, who's doing this filming. I'm going to have to get my older boy who's tall, and he can... So I'm just using the tape just to hold it in place. And then... you probably don't need to do this for a small lino cut, but for bigger ones, what happens is the paper and the block and it sort of moves a bit. If you had it just lying on the paper, and it sort of stretches, and then you'll get all these blurry lines, especially in the second half of the block. You won't get crisp lines. So you have to keep the paper up as it goes in and as it comes out. Okay. I just put these on just because the friction of the roller gives me blisters. So time again, you've got to spin the roller. want all flat. Up a bit of a pattern. Yeah, I just got to put some little stencily bits on there. Just these are wide areas, big, large wide areas that doesn't matter how low you cut down, they still pick up a bit of ink, which I don't want. One more. Yeah. Okay, so we need the paper to stay up as it goes in and stay up as it goes out. So unless you've got 4 arms, you need an extra pair of hands. Someone who's tall, this helps. If you're doing a small lino cut, you probably don't need to maybe not do this, but if you get those blurry lines, you just have to keep the paper up. So for the big prints, you do really need to. Okay, let's go. The bigger lino cuts, you do really need to do this if you're going to print this way. Okay, give it a button. I will take that out of your pages. Just fix it up a little bit with my magic stick. What I'll probably do is I'll get some masking tape and I'll put it underneath the lino where this bit is, just on the edge. It's I call that packing, so I'll just make a bit of lino a bit thicker, because this always happens on every, sort of nice everywhere else except for along this edge. So if you just put some masking tape, 1 or 2 bits under, I'll just make that bit of lino a bit thicker. And hopefully I won't have to do this every time. But, you know, it doesn't have to be totally perfect. Okay, just to kill a bit of time, because I think we've been going, I've gone too quick. I'm going to just quickly show you I'll run a print off I'll print a wood engraving off my beautiful Colombian. So here I have even finer inking, thinner than for the lino cuts. It's got super smooth and flat and thin and velvety. Spinning the roller, you can sort of tell just by the sound of it. There's already some crap on there, which is annoying. It's another handy tool. I don't want crap in the ink. Okay. Right. wood engraving is the very old-fashioned way they used to illustrate books and newspapers. It used to just be a job, be a trade like any other trade, would be to engrave illustrations. Another person's job would be line up all the type for the text. And now it's just for only retentive artists like me. Paper in there, here, drop it on. Packing, roll it in, across, roll it out, packing off, and voila. And there you have it. Now it's just time to clean up, and that is it. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I've been informed that we're still a little bit under time, so I've run out of things to. I suggested I just tell some jokes, but my children have told me I'm not to do that. So, what else can we do? Oh, look, we can show. Let's get out of the way. I can show them some stuff in the drawers. This is some of my latest work. Basically, being this new body of work is based on. I'm just doing wood engravings as studies, and then I'm enlarging those wood engravings into big lino cuts, which I'm finding really fun and interesting. Things become a bit more stylised and less bogged down with detail. The trick is it's always a borderline between if you have too much photographic reference, things can become a bit sterile or overly detailed. With no photographic reference, the danger is of things becoming too cartoony. So it's always a bit of a balance, but I'm finding these really enjoyable to do and a bit less torturous to cut. Oh, that's just plain paper. Oh, yeah, this one that I'm pretty happy with. This becomes a big one. That panel. Big picture.